everyone, and welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolfe. That is the Hall of Famer Cris Carter. That is Nick Wright. It is a beautiful Tuesday morning here in New York City, and we have got a beautiful 3 hours of sports programming for you today. Big Tuesday. Here we go. There are more rumors.
Happy birthday, Jenna Wolfe.
It's Jenna's birthday. Let's go, Jenna. Come on, people.
That was the
It's Jenna's
longest
birthday.
pregnant pause I could have possibly.
My goodness.
Wait.
Just begging for it. Happy birthday, Jenna. Maybe we had something planned later. Well, hey, guys, the big thing we got planned later, scrap it. Scrap it. She wanted it now. You could have 3 cookies later, 1 cookie right now. You wanted it right now. My God.
Of attention, and I got it, and now we move on.
50 is a big one.
Thank you. Yes, 50
27.
is a big one. 27 is even bigger.
All the
than
guys
50.
out there want to know. Jenna letting you know. Holla, holla, 27.
All the guys are wondering.
They had a
There are
chance
more
when he was
rumors
27.
swirling around Antonio Brown and Odell Beckham.
Let's go.
There
Let's talk
could be
wide
a new
receiver.
quarterback emerging on top of the draft charts, but we are going to start this program the way we've been starting a lot of programs
Need to
with
buckle up my
LeBron
shoes. It's going to be a tight show.
and the Lakers. Love you both. Another day, another bad loss for a Laker team that really doesn't have any losses to give away. Last night, they fell to the lowly Grizzlies, 110-105. LeBron did have a triple-double, but he was just 8 of 23 from the field. Lakers once again struggled with chemistry, once again struggled on defense. They're 3 games back of the 8th seed now, with 22 games left to go. Here's LeBron James on what he thinks is going on.
At this point, if you are still allowing distractions to affect how the way you play, then this is the wrong franchise to be a part of, and you should just come and be like, listen, I can't do this. Like, seriously, if you're distracted by playoff pushes and then all the stuff that's been talked about this year, that just come and do your job. We do our job at a high level, and that's not a distraction. That's what you want. That's what you want every game. You want to feel like you're fighting for something.
Nick, why did the Lakers lose last night?
Well, same old, same old. No defensive intensity to start the game whatsoever. They actually finally had their best stretch of defense they've had in maybe a month to start the fourth quarter, but that coincided with them having as bad of a stretch of offense as you can have, so it erased any progress they had there. Ridiculous coaching decisions once again. Lance Stevenson, the only guy off the bench who does anything for you in the first half. He, of course, gets 1 second of playing time in the second half, inexplicably. And LeBron's not LeBron right now. I mean, this is just, this is undeniable. LeBron said he's going to activate playoff mode, and I understand since he said that, he has averaged a triple-double, and he's given you, I think it's 27, 10, and 12 a night. But he's not LeBron. He is laboring. He is not exploding the way we're used to. And on defense, he's not a non-factor. He's a negative factor right now. These are all just obvious things to the eye. It's just like it's obvious he is playing at the heaviest weight, which is hurting his conditioning, all which lingers back to the injury. But none of that should be enough to lose to the Grizzlies. None of that should be enough to lose to the Hawks. None of that should be enough to have gotten blown out by the Pacers without Victor Oladipo. This team's a mess right now. And so I understand Laker fans this morning are mad about some very bad calls in the fourth quarter, and people are mad about a lot of things that Joe Kim Noah, all of a sudden, it was his birthday yesterday. He hit the Wayback Machine. I don't care about any of it. The Grizzlies, allowing the Grizzlies to score 34 points in the first quarter is like giving up a 50-point quarter to a real NBA offense. This is the worst offense in basketball over the course of the season, and it's gotten worse since they lost Marc Gasol, and you're playing uphill the entire game once again. This could have been a great night for the Lakers. Spurs lost again. Kings lost. You had real opportunity to make up ground, and instead, after beating the Rockets, you lose to the Pelicans with no Anthony Davis. You lose to the Grizzlies with the team they're running out there. It's not inexplicable, but it is unforgivable.
Maybe we just, because of LeBron's injury, we didn't want to make that an excuse, so we just made that part of the conversation. Maybe the Lakers won't get back to the level that they had before LeBron. The night LeBron got injured, they beat the Warriors. Maybe we would be better off served thinking this Lakers team won't get back to that level. Now, do they miss Lonzo Ball? They really, really do. But they also missed the real LeBron James. LeBron said he was going to activate the playoff LeBron. When he went to hit the button, it didn't activate.
Correct.
Because in the last 2 games, regardless of what the numbers say, when you watch LeBron, with all the eyes on LeBron, as close as we watch LeBron, he's not the same. Nick is admitting it. He does look like he's laboring more. He does look like he weighs more. He can't get to the basket with ease the way that he used to. Missed some bunnies last night, right there, point blank range. Didn't have the type of lift that we're expecting. So for me, it's LeBron is not who he was. This roster wasn't constructed well. They don't have enough shooters. They're not very, very athletic. And you talk about the young Lakers, they don't like the pressure that they're under now. LeBron talked about, man, when you're playing for this type of franchise, did Rob Pelinka and did Magic Johnson in drafting these players and the free agent players they got this offseason, they're not a good fit. And I don't have to wait till the end of the regular season to be able to see that. I wouldn't be surprised if they did something drastic. Like, this is the kind of road trip. You go to New Orleans without AD. You go to Memphis and give up that type of loss there. Typically, this is the kind of night a coach gets fired.
But if Coach was going to get fired, it would have been after the Hawks game before the All-Star break, where you have over a week to kind of and
when they didn't do it there, that to me means they might be stuck for the rest of the season.
And listen, the NBA is a players' league. LeBron James, up until a few weeks ago, was still unanimously considered the best player in the world. That might be changing as of this morning or yesterday or tomorrow. But we know the level LeBron, when he's fully operational, can take a team to. We didn't see it 9 years ago. We saw it 9 months ago in the NBA playoffs, right? So we know that exists. So this is on the players. But Luke Walton has been a travesty. There are 4 guys last night for the Lakers. LeBron, Kuzma, Ingram, and Bullock all played an entire 12-minute quarter without a rest. Why? Once again, I think because he just lost track of time. Mike Muscala played 13 minutes the first game they acquired him. He then was a DNP coach's decision every game until last night, where he plays, 11 and a half minutes. Why? No idea. And on the front office side of things, forget the draft picks. Like, those guys need to develop. When they took Lonzo and Ingram at number 2, both picks, people weren't criticizing those picks. Now, maybe they should have been savvier, but those were the consensus picks there.
Yes.
But the free agent signings, everyone criticized. And then how about the midseason move? Your best center, Zubac, is traded for Mike Muscala. Why? I don't know. There are so many things outside of the players that the team is working against what should be the obvious goal, because you wonder, is the GM really an NBA GM, and is the coach really an NBA coach?
Well, then that leads us to ask, where do you go from here? How do you finish out the season and hope you're actually going to move forward and not stay stagnant? I mean, you see it from LeBron. He's more frustrated and expresses that frustration more and more. I mean, we're starting every show with comments LeBron makes after a game, which, look, last year you didn't have a great team, but you didn't hear this level of frustration from LeBron James.
Well, for one, he was in the Eastern Conference. He's dominated the Eastern Conference with a tremendous amount of confidence. And if they could get healthy in Cleveland, how many teams could beat the Cavs last year? Maybe one in the Celtics, which they took them to the hilt.
Pacers damn near did, too.
Yeah, but that team wasn't good enough to be able to beat a LeBron James Cavs. So, no, they're stuck. This is the roster, all right? And when you look back at it, I'm going to look back at not getting Anthony Davis and being able to, those players that they talked about being involved in those trades, they haven't responded as well. The organization hadn't responded as well. So it's going to be a lost season. The first season you get LeBron James to Los Angeles could be a lost season. And the only hope would be, Sacramento, San Antonio, and what they've been doing down the stretch, not playing the type of basketball that we had seen them play for the first 2/3.
That's the only reason the Lakers are still alive.
Right.
Listen, they have to go at this point 15-7 the rest of the way, minimum, to have a chance. There is nothing we've seen over the last, basically, since Christmas Day, the day LeBron got hurt, that makes you think they can. And I want to make this very clear. A lot of this falls on LeBron. And people will say, well, it's LeBron because he has not been the same guy since the injury. I think that is true, but the injuries can be an explanation rather than an excuse, but they're a reality. And part of the reason that LeBron James is a one of one in the NBA is prior to this year, you never had to worry about this. What if he gets dinged and he's not fully operational? What if he gets dinged and at the end of the year, because of that, he doesn't have his full stamina? That has never been
something
a problem. And now we're seeing a guy, I guess maybe one of the downsides, the only downside to having never been hurt. I don't know that he knew how to deal with the conditioning and the training during an injury because he'd never had one, because he does not look anything close right now to the best player in the world.
Well, you mentioned you'd like to see him go 15-7. They have to go 15-7. They've gone 4-10 over the last 14, so it's not looking great for the Lakers. We'll take a break, switch to some football on the other side. Coming up, how new details now on where Antonio Brown might end up. That's next on FS1. You can always check us out on the Fox Sports channel on SiriusXM. We will be right back.
Robinhood is an investing app that lets you buy and sell stocks, ETFs, options, and cryptos, all commission-free. They strive to make financial services work for everyone, not just the wealthy. Robinhood is a non-intimidating way for stock market newcomers to invest for the first time with true confidence. Robinhood is simple and intuitive with a clear design that shows data presented in an easy-to-digest way. Here's why I recommend Robinhood. No commission fees. Other brokerages charge up to $10 for every trade, but Robinhood doesn't charge commission fees. Trade stocks and keep all of your profits. It's simple. Easy to understand charts and market data. Place a trade in just 4 taps on your smartphone. Robinhood web platform also lets you view stock collections. Collections are like sectors like entertainment, social media, curated categories like female CEOs, and analyst ratings of buy, hold, sell for every stock. You learn by doing it. Learn how to invest as you build your portfolio. Discover new stocks and track favorite companies with personalized news feeds. Custom notifications for price movements so you never miss the right moment to invest. Robinhood is giving our listeners a free stock, such as Apple, Ford, or Sprint, to help build your portfolio. Sign up at first.robinhood.com. That's first.robinhood.com.
We'll get to Antonio Brown in a minute, but first, check this out. FSU's Terrence Mann going up high for the one-handed putback slam.
Look, let me see this again. Young fellow with the good hair. I think this might be the wrong video. However, it's still a nice dunk.
Sixers Pelicans, Ben Simmons, watch it.
This one
Behind
is
the
the right
back
video.
to evade the defender before making the easy layup.
Hello,
Ben
around the
Simmons.
world, see?
He is a great defensive player, and man, you got to get to your spot on the court. That's him inside the restricted zone.
He did.
He's nasty inside
got there.
Got some Suns and Heat.
Oh.
Dwayne Wade spinning through the defense, hitting the up and under layup.
Man, the time machine was working last night. D. Wade, Noah. I mean, it was in full effect, and the cornrows that he's got in his hair.
What's D-Wade doing with the hair?
Oh man, he's trying to get younger, man.
We got to talk to Gabby.
You marry a younger woman and
Aren't we
everything,
all?
it happens, man.
I think he
It
married
happens,
an
man.
older woman.
Moving on to Antonio Brown.
I'm correct.
If I were a betting girl, I'd put my money on the disgruntled wide receiver not playing for the Steelers next season. He wants a trade, and he has hinted at possible destinations. One of those hints, his Instagram post photoshopped in a 49ers jersey. Right now, the Niners are the betting favorite at a landing spot if Brown is moved, with teams like the Saints and Packers not far behind. Cece, what do you think? What's the most likely landing spot for Antonio Brown?
I think San Francisco is one of the landing spots, but if you listen to some of the information coming out of Pittsburgh, because there's tremendous restriction they're putting on trading a very, very valuable commodity. They're not going to trade him to New England. They're not going to trade him to anyone in the AFC North. And they prefer not to trade him to anyone in the AFC. So, yeah, we can keep drawing things up of where he might end up, who has draft picks and everything. But I think that San Francisco will be among the teams that right now they're in a pressure situation. Like, they got to be able to get some playmakers for Jimmy Garoppolo, for him to be as efficient and get their money's worth from him as a quarterback. So I think San Francisco is one of the spots. I also look for Tampa Bay. Deshaun Jackson, He's not happy there. They're going to get him out. Bruce Arians coming into town. He's had experience with Antonio. So I look for Tampa Bay to be a part of it. The Colts might be a part of it. The Jets might be a part of it. So I think there are a couple landing spots for him that I believe, but Kyle Shanahan, I believe in San Francisco, is the most likely spot today for him to land up.
Okay, so if we just want to cross out New England, we know he'd be deadly in New England, but they don't want to trade in New England, understandably. We want to cross out the Bengals, Ravens, and Browns because they're AFC North teams. Every other team is at least potentially a viable option. The reality is every other team in the league would be a good fit for Antonio Brown because he's that type of player. Take the Kansas City Chiefs with the third highest scoring offense ever. You know what? He could help them because he can help everybody. Or the Oakland Raiders, who seem to be a mess offensively
regardless
this
of quarterbacks?
I believe he fits anywhere.
Well, this is the thing. I don't believe he fits anywhere because he's been targeted on average 10 to 15 times a game. He has played in dynamic offenses that were typically spread offenses where they had 3 receivers on the field. He has had the luxury to be able to have the flexibility inside the system of Pittsburgh that he could freelance an awful lot. What you find out in free agency is you find out a lot of things that they don't tell you before you sign the contract. So for me, I'm apprehensive. If he doesn't have a Hall of Fame quarterback, I believe you will see more outburst like we saw in Pittsburgh later in his career. If they don't have 3 receivers on the field where he has the flexibility to be able to play multiple positions, you will see a guy get frustrated like we saw in Pittsburgh. And if he's not prime time, if he's not playing in the big games, how is he going to react? So thinking he's a no-brainer for the other 31 teams, we'd be very, very naive, all right? We're mostly system players. This is not a guy that can go to any system and to be able to play well. How would he do well in Jacksonville? Well, they run the ball. They run the ball an awful lot. Tom Coughlin overseeing that. They're a little more strict, a little more firm there. How would that work out? So I believe that there are better landing spots for AB than others.
I totally agree. There's a hierarchy of ideal and not ideal for Antonio Brown. The point I was making is every team in the league, in my opinion, gets better when you add a player of his caliber. But if we are trying to fit the puzzle pieces together, Cris mentioned one of them in the Colts, where they have cap space, they have extra draft picks, and I believe T.Y. Hilton is an okay number 1 receiver, but would be a dynamic number 2. But there's another one that is in the NFC, that has the Hall of Fame quarterback, that has the extra draft capital, that has the cap space, and that wants to win right now.
Green Bay.
And that's Green Bay. And now, we know he can play in cold weather. Now, I understand Pittsburgh's not as cold as Green Bay, but it's not like he's been playing his career in a dome. We also know that he's thrived with a Hall of Fame quarterback. We also know Green Bay has, I believe, more of a urgency right now than they have in recent years. That is a spot that I think every piece fits. For the Steelers, you don't worry about it because they're cross-conference.
Right.
For AB, you know they play a lot of the 3 wide receiver set you're talking about, C. You're going to have a quarterback, one of the few guys in the league in my eyes, that would actually be a clear step up from Ben Roethlisberger. There's a lot of boxes checked with the Green Bay Packers to go along with. They can trade a first-round pick and still have a first-round pick in reserve.
Okay, what about this question? The one guy that you guys have not mentioned at all is Mike Tomlin. How much is he going to need a coach who's going to be able to understand how to deal with him, his on-field stuff, his off-field stuff, the way Mike Tomlin was able to do? Or maybe he's thinking he wasn't able to do it.
Well, the locker room is a huge locker room. I believe that Antonio, once he's traded, he'll be motivated. He'll be motivated because he's still trying to get a new contract. And there's certain things as far as football players and him getting to the job, working, doing that. He's going to put his best foot forward. Man, Antonio, it's like Randy Moss when he left Oakland. Man, when he went to New England, that wasn't the Randy Moss they got. They didn't have to worry about him not being on time, him not running the right route, him freelancing, some of the things that people had said about him before he got there. So I believe on Antonio, he will have a career check on this, and he will make sure that he's doing all the right thing because that's the way he used to do things in Pittsburgh before he became a big-time star.
But that's Bill Belichick. There aren't a lot of Bill Belichicks, a lot of players that will actually change who they are, how they do things because of the head coach. Do you think that factors in at all? When you think the quarterback factors in, does the head coach as well?
I think it's similar to the Le'Veon Bell discussion we had, which is it depends on the type of locker room you have as far as is he going to, the moment he gets there, become a de facto leader face of the team, or do you already have those people in place via your coach or your quarterback? I want to throw one wild card team at UCC because this doesn't, by the way, they don't have a Hall of Fame quarterback. They got a young quarterback. They don't have a Hall of Fame coach. They got a first-year coach. But what they do have is the number 1 pick of the draft in the Arizona Cardinals. If they trade back, if they decide we're not taking a quarterback, obviously, at number 1, our best value is to get a bunch of extra draft picks for a team that wants to trade up to get Haskins or Kyler or whomever the number 1 player is. When you have Larry Fitzgerald there in his final year, you have a quarterback in Josh Rosen that they are trying to build around but obviously needs a lot of help. You have the warm indoor climate in Arizona. Is that, to you, more of a combustible situation or a situation with Fitzy there that could work out quite well?
Well, I'm not going to say it's a more combustible situation. He's not competitive. Arizona's not going to be competitive. Is that the type of environment that he wants to go in to try to finish his career? He's in love with social media. He's in love with the gram. He showed up to training camp in a helicopter. Like, is that really what the Arizona Cardinals need with a new, unproven coach? That, I mean, there's going to be a question about control when you have Cliff Kingsbury and his young age taking over NFL locker room. He wasn't successful in college. So I don't think Steve Keim, the general manager, because he has taken some chances on some players, I don't think that that's the type of gift you want to give Larry Fitzgerald in his last season to bring Antonio, who you talking about polar opposites of each other. Now, these are polar opposites of each other.
All right, we'll stick with wide receivers on the other side. Coming up, are the Giants making the right choice holding on to OBJ? That's next on First Things First. Here's a quick and free way to finally stick to your New Year's resolutions. Start listening to podcasts on Spotify. With more than 150,000 podcasts, including many of the world's most popular self-improvement shows, you can learn how to balance a budget, balance your diet, and even learn how to feel balanced while meditating. All podcasts on Spotify are free, and you can download episodes for those times when you've gone off the grid, you know, to get all that newfound balance back into your life. So start the year off right and start listening to podcasts on Spotify. Tomorrow, it's the game of the year in the Big East as Phil Booth leads Villanova against Marcus Howard, number 10 Marquette. The action tips off at 9 Eastern on FS1 and the Fox Sports app.
Our pal Jay Wright needs this win.
Go, Jay. Time for us to go viral. Last night, the Lakers fell to the lowly Grizzlies, 110-105. LeBron had a triple-double, but was just 8 of 23 from the field. And this fan trolled the King at the Memphis postgame show, holding up a sign that read, "LeBron will ruin Space Jam," like he did the Lakers.
Oh, that's well done. That's a good troll job.
Cruel.
I like if you're watching League Pass, a bunch of teams have their pre- and post-game stuff in the arena with the fans coming out. Our friend Chris Mannix, who's been on the show obviously a bunch, when he does stuff with the Celtics, they do a similar setup like that. I like that. And that's a good sign, a little game.
Mannix will be out here in a little bit. He can tell us all about those guys and that sign, but he won't. Time for some stories to start your morning, starting with one of the big names coming out of the NFL draft, Kyler Murray. A lot of concerns about the quarterback's stature may soon be alleviated. According to reports, he is up to 206 pounds. See, how important is Kyler's weight come combine time?
Weight is very, very important as a quarterback, especially when you're undersized. We just haven't seen many guys under 210 pounds in the NFL. That is a standard. There is a height standard, that being around 6'1", and there's a weight standard, and that being around 215 pounds. So being under that, and if it's hand size, which I think is going to be very small, typically small people got small feet, small hands.
So this is the only thing, though.
It will affect.
This is the only thing he can control, though. Between now and the combine, he can't
to
get
a certain
taller.
degree. Because you only have so much when you're frame.
Right. You can only carry so much. My point is that he's not getting taller, no matter how big he grows his hair, and his hands aren't getting bigger. So he is showing the attention that he understands the thing. Control your controllables.
Yeah, I do have some hand exercises that I show my kids that fudge the test a little bit.
Oh,
so
really?
Then it actually makes it a little bit longer.
Oh, because
you get your thumb down because they go this way when they measure.
Call Kyler.
I got you. For a small fee, small person.
Of course. To the NBA now, James Harden scored 28 points in a win against the Hawks last night. That snaps his 32-game streak of scoring at least 30 points. Going 0 for 10 from deep didn't help his cause in this one. But, Nick, how impressive was this streak?
This was all-time stuff, man. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is – I don't think this streak will be matched anytime soon. By soon, I mean in years and years in the NBA. Like, there's a reason that it was Wilt Chamberlain's alone, and Wilt Chamberlain's streak is untouchable. So this is essentially the modern-day record. And most importantly, team 22-10 during the streak. Like, I mean, this was a team that took advantage, or 21-11, pardon me, during the streak, took advantage of it. It was going to come to an end, came to an end last night.
This streak was out of necessity.
Yes.
I mean, they had a couple frontline players banged up, and he took over. I don't think it can be duplicated because of the durability. We'll never give James Harden, but in this, he showed unusual athleticism and the ability to be durable every single night doing that. Outstanding. Legendary stuff.
All right, to the Hawks side of this one, Trae Young lit it up last night. 36 points, including 8 3-pointers in Atlanta's loss to Houston. Nick, what'd you make of Trae's night?
And they were all deep threes. I mean, we're showing him none of these were feet close to the line.
I think he had 6 beyond 27 feet.
Absolutely. He had 8 made threes, all of them 26 feet or longer, and as you mentioned, 6 longer than 27 feet. If people haven't been watching the Hawks, which I don't blame you if you haven't been, the weakness in Trae Young's game so far this year has actually been his three-point efficiency. Believe it or not, he's been an excellent playmaker. He's been better at the rim than people thought. He just hadn't been able to find his stroke early on. I really liked him coming out of OU. I thought what he did his freshman year was spectacular, and now we're seeing it click in for him just a bit.
Yeah, and if he needs to have that type of range, because with a small frame, if you can have that Steph Curry, there's only a few people, that 26, 27, 28 feet, it makes it very difficult for the defense because, as you mentioned, he was better in the lane than we expected.
He's one of the many rookies that's just getting overshadowed because of how great Luka's been.
Moving on to the Celtics now. Their woes starting to outshine their pros. They've dropped 4 of their last 6, 5th place in the East, and thus more stories coming out on their pursuit of Anthony Davis. According to reports, they are prepared to offer literally anyone on their roster this offseason, including Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Boston also, remember, has an array of picks to offer the Pelicans. Nick, what do you think? Should the Celtics blow up their roster to trade for Anthony Davis?
Well, it's the only chance they have to trade for Anthony Davis. Like, let's make this very clear. If they weren't going to include Jason Tatum and other pieces as well, then the story is the Celtics are not going to pursue Anthony Davis. Because the 2021 Memphis pick ain't getting it done. Jaylen Brown ain't getting it done. And so what this story didn't say is they will do this even if Kyrie leaves. That's going to be the real question for Danny Ainge, and I think I know the answer to that, which is if Kyrie leaves, will you still trade away Jason Tatum and others for what could be a 1-year rental on Anthony Davis? You can make a strong argument you shouldn't. The argument you should is he'll come here, he'll love it, he'll love the culture, he'll love the fans, he'll want to stay. It's a big risk. But it's also, as we see more of Tatum and Brown and we see more of their young players, the risk to me becomes slightly smaller because Jason Tatum, I never said that he was a surefire scoring champ at some point in his future. I know a lot of people thought he was. What is Jason Tatum's best case scenario upside? What is Jaylen Brown's best case scenario upside? Those are real questions because we know the Lakers are going to offer everything. The Bulls might offer a guy like Lauri Markkanen, who is right now statistically better than any of the young players the Celtics have throughout his career. So there are some other factors to be at play here.
The Celtics are very fortunate that this deal wasn't done before the trade deadline. So they got it where they wanted to, where they can play out this year with Kyrie have a chance to try to get to the finals, because that would be a very successful season with Kyrie and Gordon Hayward coming back. But to me, if Kyrie leaves, I can't trade for Anthony Davis. I can't trade everything on a rental. Like, I understand what happened in OKC with Paul George. Very unique situation and great for the NBA, and Paul George is thriving there. I don't believe that Kawhi is going to do the same thing in Toronto. Now, if we have back-to-back top 5 players that on a rental have decided that they're going to stay in Toronto, is a smaller market, less than advantageous than other markets, but that would be huge news in the NBA. Back-to-back, Paul George, Kawhi. Then I think that Boston, but I don't think that's going to happen. Right. So for me, I wouldn't take the chance, because I believe that there's better landing spots. You mentioned Chicago. New York would be on the books because Kyrie would be there. KD would be there. So yes, like I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't trade everything, losing Kyrie Irving, trade Tatum. I wouldn't do that.
But I want Celtics fans and everyone to understand that we know what New Orleans turned down for Anthony Davis, right? All the Lakers young guys, multiple picks. So they clearly believe they can do better than that offer. Well, let's just show, you don't need a blind reveal here. Let's just show the young guys versus the young guys. Because Ingram, by the way, who's played great in the last couple weeks, Ingram and Kuzma versus Tatum and Brown, it was just a given that obviously Tatum and Brown are a better duo. Okay, if they are, they have not, the per-game stats aren't showing it. And with Ingram coming on strong at the end of the year and Tatum and Brown trailing off to a degree, there is an element of, well, can Boston even get in the game? If they turn down from the Lakers, right. Ingram, Kuzma, I'm not even including Lonzo Ball, who, depending on the executive you talk to, either think he's a very good prospect or not a very good prospect. Those 3 guys plus picks. So for the Celtics, is it Tatum, Brown, and the Memphis pick, plus Marcus Smart to make the salaries work? That would be the type of deal Danny Ainge has never made. Danny Ainge has never been the all-in move.
But is that the one he'd have to do? If you're the Pelicans, you'd want that or more, right?
Well, given what they turned down from the Lakers, you would think that is the standard that they are setting. They didn't turn down that Lakers offer to sell low on Anthony Davis this summer. Right. That much I know.
All right, let's move on to Odell Beckham. Our guy Jay Glazer caused a stir when he made a bold prediction that Odell might be traded from the Giants this offseason. But according to reports, that's not happening. Odell Beckham is not on the trading block. Keep in mind, Big Blue gave Odell a 5-year extension last summer. Chris, are the Giants making the right choice holding on to Odell Beckham Jr.?
They are making the right choice in holding on to him, because the hardest decision am I going to give him this new contract with the big signing bonus? When you see these big contracts in the NFL, man, that first year and a half, that's the tough part. That's the part you have to stomach. You're hoping they don't get hurt, have some career-threatening injury, but that's the part where the signing bonus and all those things, like, once you get through that, man, you start getting to the better part of the contract where you are getting a great player at a good price. So, no, I wouldn't give up. Odell hadn't done anything to me that would say, I'm ready to move on from him. He's not in the news. He's working on his game. He's trying to get better. And I believe that the Giants did a good job by removing this from his mindset. Because as a wide receiver, man, you don't want our minds to be drifting in the offseason. Because Odell, he could entertain that send me to New England. Yeah. Oh, send me somewhere else. Oh, you don't think, send me to the L.A. Rams, which was on the board last year before they traded for Cooks there at wide receiver. So Giants did a great job by putting it out there. No, we're not trading them. The Giants got too many holes. Offensive line is awful. Defensively, they need a cornerback. They need another rusher. They need a linebacker. So now if I trade Odell, I got another big hole that I have to fill. There's no one on that roster that's a number 2 ready to be a number 1, a 3 ready to be a 2. No, they need Odell Beckham and Barkley. That is the cornerstone of their franchise. Draft yourself a quarterback. This is not real hard stuff.
Well, that's the other part of it, is if you might draft a quarterback, you think that quarterback is in a better position to succeed or worse with Odell or without Odell? Listen, there are fair criticisms about Odell Beckham, and God knows this show and every show in America has talked about them a lot over the last few years. But the idea that he's not a winner or that he can't be a part of a winning team is ludicrous. Now, does Odell care a little too much about what is said about him publicly? I think he does, and I've told him that. Like, man, you can't worry about what folks in my position are saying. Does Odell wear his emotions on his sleeve on the sideline to a degree that can almost be a distraction? Sure, I think that's a fair criticism. I think he'd acknowledge that. Doesn't mean he's going to be able to fix it, by the way, but I think he'd acknowledge that. But that's not a sign of someone that doesn't care about winning. That's not a sign of someone that is all me, me, me. It might be a sign of immaturity to a degree.
Listen, you can't look inside of a person. And I get sick and tired of wide receivers because we deserve a lot of things. The nicknames, the divas, the prima donnas, things like that. Yeah, can we be a distraction? But when you start saying things personal like, oh, you're not a winner. Well, what kind of machine do you have that looks inside of it and say, oh, he's not a winner? On a football team that's got a bunch of selfish people, but you know something? They don't have speaking roles. And sometimes they're offensive linemen and defensive linemen. You know, some people aren't interviewing them, but, you know, they're just as selfish as wide receivers. Quarterbacks, they're more selfish than wide receivers, but we don't care to even talk about that. So, man, talking about people who want to win and all those type of things, there is no type of test that we can give to a person to say, hey, you know something, this guy wants to win more than it. When you train your body to play at a high level and you play wide receiver, how am I going to help the team? Oh, you want me to be some big physical blocker? Get out of here with that mess. The way I'm going to help this football team is by getting first downs and getting touchdowns. And those are recorded by the numbers. So the numbers become important in wide receivers doing their job. So, yes, they should think about the numbers because they're in a numbers business, and that's the way to evaluate how you're doing as a wide receiver.
A couple weeks ago, you mentioned something I didn't think about, that you thought Odell was one injury away from being considered perhaps injury-prone, just because in his short career he has sustained a couple of injuries. Is that a concern at all if you're the Giants holding on to him?
To me, it's not.
Factor that in.
To me, it's not just because they aren't. He's not a guy like, with respect, Sammy Watkins, who it's like, man, another soft tissue injury. Yep. Another foot injury. He got his leg broken 2 years ago. That's
all football-related injuries. And if the Giants felt that way, they wouldn't have locked him up to this deal. Now, this is just something that we were talking about. Like, he can't afford to get nicked again.
He can't miss listen, he misses the vast majority of 2017, missed the tail end of 2018. If in 2019 he misses time again, you say, okay, you know, that's a trend at this point. But when a guy gets paid and still is near tears at times about the losses, you can say, listen, part of being a professional is understanding the ups and the downs. There are fair knocks about immaturity, about growth, about dealing with the long season, being a leader. But the idea that whether we're 5-11 or 11-5, as long as I'm getting my money, as long as I'm getting my fame, that is, I know the player. Cris knows the player very well. That's not who he is.
Let me tell you, I want a bunch of guys in the locker room or in their car, because for a person I knew, it was about the car. I wasn't going to be crying in that locker room. But I got to my car, and it was many days I cried there. I couldn't stand losing. I wasn't a good loser. But I'll take a bunch of them compared to a bunch of guys trying to celebrate we going to the strip club compared to, man, this is my business. I take a lot of pride in it, and that's why you see that type of reaction. Yeah, I wish that I would have handled it better. And as my career went on, I ultimately end up handling it better. But, man, losing sucks. It sucks in this league when you work all week and then it don't get paid off on Sunday. That means he's not there just for the check, because if he was doing that, then that would be criticism that would be warranted. Man, he is a winner. He wants to play, and you can see that it's eaten away. But if you look at the rookie campaign of Barkley and think that Odell Beckham being on that field did not help that kid achieve that, then you're missing a lot of what football is about.
All right, take a break. Coming up, let's talk some Lakers. Does this team have a shot at the playoffs after losing to Memphis last night? That and more ahead on First Things First. Back Here, first things first, senior NBA writer for Sports Illustrated, Chris Mannix joins us. Hey,
What up,
Chris.
man?
What's up,
Friend
man?
of the show.
Friend of the
Friend
show.
of the show.
It's Mannix. M-A.
Hey, bro, what are we talking about stuff
Sorry,
we do?
is that?
That was a
That's
year
off the
ago,
air.
see? That was a year ago, man.
We'll get that
That's
cut.
his
We'll get that
charm,
cut for next
Chris. He just likes to
Okay.
massage the names a little
Okay,
bit.
now
we were just starting to get
0%
along.
gets
Me and you versus McManus. Let's go.
Let's talk 76ers. They took down the Pelicans last night without their star center, Joel Embiid. He missed his third straight game with a sore knee. Not to worry, though, the Sixers were helped handily by Tobias Harris and his 29 points. Bit of a blow, though, for Philly. Boban had to leave the game with a knee injury. He'll have an MRI later today. Chris Mannix, what has to happen, do you think, for the Sixers to go on a run at this point?
Well, there are a few things. I don't think they're wed to one. The rotation's got to be figured out. I mean, right now, Brett Brown's kind of all over the place with what he's doing and who he's mixing and matching lineups, which is understandable. I mean, they changed up their entire team twice this season. Jimmy Butler and then Tobias Harris. That's number one. The shooting from Ben Simmons, from unsuspecting outlets on that team, that's got to happen. But if I'm looking at the number one thing, it's got to be Jimmy Butler being assertive in the fourth quarter of these games. Jimmy Butler, his shooting numbers are down a little bit since he came over from the Timberwolves. He's only taken about 13.5 shots per game. He did take 16 last night. It was only 5 for 16 from the floor. But in the previous games, if you look at some of those numbers, it's 7 shots.
a lot of 11 and 13-point games.
Yeah, and like he's the one guy on that team that has to be able to take over games late in it. He's the only guy really that can do it. I love Joel Embiid. You can go through him quarters 1 through 3.5. Ben Simmons can go to the basket, create offense. But if you need one bucket, it's got to be Jimmy Butler going to get it. And if he's not, they're not going to have much of a chance.
One thing that I think that they're able to see with Joel Embiid being out, because I believe that Tobias Harris is an underrated scorer, because not only you can run offense for him, but he can get his shot, go off the dribble, can get to the rim. I like the ability to be able to experiment with him, because Jimmy Butler, I understand that, and I respect that. And I think Philadelphia did a great job after the first trade. Those first few games, when it came down to crunch situations, they called Jimmy Butler's number, and he came through. I like the fact that let's reestablish that, because we made another change on this roster, trying to get the feel for it. But I like the fact in these last 20 games, let's reestablish Jimmy Butler as he's going to be our guy to close out, because you're going to need in the playoffs. Man, they call it different. You need a veteran player, and I can understand why you would say Jimmy Butler is the only guy outside of Joel Embiid, because Joel Embiid's going to draw some fouls, but what type of whistle is he going to get in the playoffs? Jimmy Butler is that X factor. He can be the closer.
He didn't get those whistles last year against Aaron Baines in the first round. He didn't get those whistles.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Baines, because he's on the Boston Celtics, and this is where the key is for the Sixers, is that they are staring at, it would appear, a potential first-round matchup with Boston. Now, with no Embiid, the Boban injury is big, by the way. They would have lost to Miami last week if Boban didn't have a monster game. He has been very good for them in spots. With no Embiid and no Boban for the next few games, we would imagine, their next 2 games are OKC and Golden State. Like, okay, so you're without your best player, without your backup center, you're already a thin team. So that would be very easy for them all of a sudden to flip-flop with Boston, 4-5 to 5-4. And we know that Philly, for all of Boston's struggles, Boston sure seems to have Philly's number over the last couple of years. There are some issues there, right? So how can they change it this season in the playoffs? The answer is what you said, is Jimmy Butler. Because late in playoff games, Jimmy Butler is what every great team has to have. A guy you do not have to run a play for, a guy you can clear it out for. It is what the Celtics were missing last year without Kyrie Irving in the postseason. It is go down the list. It is what the Rockets have with Harden, what the Warriors have with Steph or KD, a guy who can just go do it. I like Tobias Harris. I don't love him as my 2 minutes left in a 3-point playoff game. Give it to him.
Absolutely. I can understand that, yes.
And so, and Embiid, it's tough to run those plays for centers. Even when Shaq was in his prime, it's tough to just dump it down to him late in playoff games, because guys just wrap you up and say, you know what I mean, beat us at the free throw line if you get the call. So Jimmy Butler's the key. And the reality is Jimmy Butler, the best part about him since he came to Philly has been he hasn't seemed aggrieved by his lack of major role, but he actually needs to take on a bigger role down the stretch in late in games. We said this a few weeks ago. It's true today. The first 3 quarters, you said it just right, Mannix. First 3 quarters are Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons time. The end of games has to be Jimmy Butler's time because that's also when Ben Simmons will become a liability because you're going to be playing 5-on-4 because he's not going to provide the outside shooting. And as much as I like what J.J. Redick has done, before they got Butler, they were running the end-of-game stuff through J.J. Redick because they had no other option, which shows their limitations in that spot. So the answer is absolutely Jimmy Butler.
How much does it help the Sixers that the Celtics are struggling? And there's, you don't know when Oladipo's coming back with the Pacers, so there's a little more wiggle room.
Oladipo's done for the year.
Okay, so there you go. So, I mean, there's a little more freedom and leeway there on the top of the East.
You know, but the Celtics have owned them, but the Sixers haven't been good against anybody at the top of the East. I think they're 3-8 against the top 4 teams in the Eastern Conference, and they'd only have 4 games left against them. And look, the sense of urgency in Philadelphia has to be sky high right now because for a lot of the pieces involved, there's a ton at stake. I mean, Brett Brown at some point has to prove he can win at a high level in the postseason. The Sixers ownership group is preparing to spend maybe the most money of any team in the history of the NBA if they bring all these guys back and eventually max out Ben Simmons. If you get knocked off in the second round, that might give everybody else kind of reason for pause. Jimmy Butler, if he struggles with this group in the playoffs, what does he do? Does he decide, look, maybe this isn't for me. I'm going to take my talents on a 4-year contract somewhere else. So you can say it for a lot of the teams in the Eastern Conference playoffs, Toronto, Boston, but Philadelphia might have as much stake as anyone in this playoffs.
And you mentioned in the second round, if Indiana, to their credit, despite no Oladipo, is staying strong.
And their schedule stinks in the next week.
If Indiana stays in the 3 spot, then Boston or Philly, one of them's going home in the first round.
Yep.
And so that's the other reason why it's not just
I would
about,
be shocked if Indiana was able to hold on to that 3 spot.
I would be too.
But their schedule, like they have the next 5 games, I was looking at it, they should win all 5. They could go 5-0 in the next 5.
I would be too, Chris, but I thought when Oladipo went down, they were going to fall apart that moment. Instead, they have won at the same level without him as they did with him. It would be very interesting to see the final quarter of the season if they can hold that spot there.
All right, Chris, we'll see you a little bit later on in the show. Coming up, is there a surprise quarterback about to overtake Dwayne Haskins and Kyler Murray in the draft? That's next on First Things First. Welterweight world champ Showtime. Sean Porter defending his belt for the first time live in primetime March 9th only on Fox. Time now for us to go viral. Check out this video. Comes our way from Ukraine. Oh, this is as athletic as it gets.
Lord.
Watch it. The impossible backflip. Oh.
No.
That is core strength about as good as
What
you'll
about his
see.
rotator cuff?
Yes, but
What
look, what do you think's stopping him? You know, I don't know.
Hold on. But your point is the double jointedness or?
The strength in his upper arms to be able to hold him up like that. Jenna's more concerned about his stomach. I mean, the stomach's part of it, but
It's incredible.
I mean, he's got some ridiculous arm strength.
That is
to do that.
incredible.
I think it's Photoshop. I don't think human beings can do that.
Video? You photoshopped the video?
Yeah. But have you seen movies, Jenna?
Okay, I didn't
I mean,
think about
special effects.
It's your birthday, Jenna. It's your
Give me a
birthday.
pass.
It's your birthday.
Photoshop the video?
My new
When did
thing
that
this year-
technology come
Listen,
out?
my new thing this year is I'm not going to believe everything everyone tells me. I have been very
No.
gullible
This is the
past year.
problem, though. You believe so much stuff that other people have been telling you. Nick and I have been trying to correct it for the last year and a half.
I don't know
believe
what to believe.
No.
Just you guys.
We can't give you misinformation. That
Okay.
would really pollute the tank.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to believe.
Just real quick, since we mentioned movies, it didn't win best documentary this year, but it was really good. I thought it should have. Jurassic Park, really well done. Documentary film.
Okay, not a documentary. That is a real movie. Okay, real movie. And it came out like 10 years ago. Back to the NFL.
That one was fake, but the new one.
Heading into this
Lost footage.
weekend's combine,
Yeah.
the top 2
Do
quarterbacks
this.
available are presumed to be Kyler Murray and Dwayne Haskins, but according to reports, they're not even everyone's top 2. Other quarterbacks on the top of some teams' boards include former Missouri quarterback Drew Lock and former Duke quarterback Daniel Jones. All right, CC, it's an easy question. Who is the best quarterback in this year's draft?
It's his NFL, right? NFL draft, right?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Okay, Haskins.
Yeah.
Because if it was some other type of draft, then I might be able to make a case for some of these other guys. But if it was, I can't remember the last time that we had a quarterback, if it's ever happened, threw for 50 touchdowns from a Power 5 conference, let alone being from a school like Ohio State, that they would question, is this guy a first rounder? Like, I wonder, what are people looking at? Like, what kind of football did you watch last year to not know Dwayne Haskins and what he did with that Ohio State team? He's the best quarterback in they've been playing football over 120 years. He's the best quarterback. We've had hundreds of pros. He's the best quarterback that's ever played for the institution. His ability to be able to read defenses, his ability to be able to deliver the football at all angles. He's got a rifle arm. He's a great leader. He took over. He's a redshirt sophomore, but he took over in the Michigan game as a redshirt freshman. When J.T. Barrett gets hurt late in the game, they have a 3rd and long. Ryan Day, who has a tremendous amount of confidence, and I don't believe people are giving him enough credit, he drops back. Watch the quick set. He rifles the ball down the sideline, 3rd and 13, puts the ball in that small window because this coaching staff had tremendous confidence, even though J.T. Barrett, as a 4-year starter was there. They knew the offense was going to get better. He transformed that offense. They've never run an offense like that at Ohio State. They ran it because of his skill set. And I just believe his overall football IQ, how he's able to recognize his defenses, and the impact that Ryan Day, because people think Ryan Day, he's the head coach at Ohio State, that people don't know. But he's also got a pro background. He comes from the Chip Kelly coaching tree. Chip Kelly, he was a quarterback at New Hampshire when Chip Kelly was the coach there. Oh, yeah. And then eventually went on to meet up with Chip Kelly in Philadelphia and went on with him to San Francisco. So when you talk to Ryan Day, when you talk about Haskins, he talks about quarterbacks that he's seen, and that being Matt Ryan and that being Sam Bradford, the accuracy that he throws the ball and the type of leadership. And I think both of those guys are great examples in their pro career of doing both. Sam Bradford not able to stay healthy, but no one ever questioned his overall accuracy. So I just think when it's all said and done at the combine, people will start to see, wow, this guy, he's really into football. He's the face of the franchise. He's a legitimate 6'3". He has a cannon of an arm. So I look for Dwayne Haskins to get better in pro football. Typically, we see the other way around. He's just now getting started. He's 21, doesn't turn 22 until May. Man, I mean, his future is very, very bright, and I think the brightest of all the quarterbacks that we have in this year's draft.
The idea that Daniel Jones from Duke or Drew Lock from Missouri are anywhere in the discussion here is ludicrous. It's patently ludicrous. Those two guys combined for 50 touchdowns on the year, combined, and for just over 6,000 passing yards. Haskins himself had 50 touchdowns and nearly 5,000 passing yards. Okay, so that's first of all. Second of all, he checks every box but experience. The only box he doesn't, he is the right height. Yep. He is the right style. He has the right numbers. He has the right intangibles. He went to a big-time school. He won at a high level. This is the area where even in 2019, you sense a bit of the but with the black quarterback. Because there is no world that exists where a white Dwayne Haskins with this profile at that school with that production, if all of a sudden in a black Drew Lock, they were like, you know what, maybe Drew Lock out of Missouri is the better NFL pick. Like this is, and we can't even apply it to, it's not like, well, we don't know about his style. So we saw a similar thing, Cam Newton, when he just ran through college football at Auburn, and then there was a quarterback from Missouri named Blaine Gabbert, and they're like, you know what? Maybe he's the better prospect. That was ludicrous, but at least in that instance, you had the small excuse of, well, Cam is so much of a runner. How much of that? This guy never runs. I think he has less than 200 career rushing yards. He is a prototypical drop-back passer. Now, if Kyler's height isn't a killer for him, Kyler could be an interesting, I'll be interested to see how their careers match up, because at least Kyler was as productive and successful at the
Kyler's
level.
The only quarterback they should compare.
Correct.
Now, you can't compare because the height, 5'9" to 6'3", but based on the way they threw the football and perform, he's the only guy that you can compare Haskins to as a thrower. We know that they're not the same types of runners.
So what are scouts talking about then? So why are we even having this discussion if it seems like it's so obvious?
Every year, there's always a couple quarterbacks, and I say this position more than any other because everyone's always looking for the Montana, for the Brady. But they bump them up. These guys were drafted appropriately. Joe Montana was not a high draft pick. Tom Brady was not a high draft pick. But because the position and because the need, you see all this extra hype right before the draft of all these guys, they're going to be great. If you're not great at throwing the football in college, it's very, very, very rare to impossible to get better at throwing the ball in pro football.
Go ahead.
Isn't this sort of what happened with Josh Allen a little bit? That he came from a small school, wasn't that successful, but he fit all the prototypes. He was tall, he had a strong arm, he looked like the quarterback that all the John Elways want to hire. And then you see how they struggle a little bit in the NFL.
Listen, you don't. The thing that is over 40 years of NFL history, we have documented proof on. The hardest thing to improve from the college level to the professional level is your completion percentage. The one guy in recent history that's gone real high and done it is Matt Stafford. He was not a very accurate collegiate quarterback, and he has become more accurate, even though he's still not the most accurate professional quarterback. You could maybe argue also Brett Favre. And Favre, though, is kind of a one-of-one story in a lot of ways in NFL history. If you are not accurate at the college level with open throwing lanes, less complex offenses, worse defenses, how are you going to get? Now, your arm can get a bit stronger. You can learn more football. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things you can make better decisions. There's a lot of things you obviously improve on. Accuracy. Haskins completed 70% of his passes. And I'm also a little biased just because as much as you respected J.T. Barrett, the only 4-year captain at your university ever, right?
Yes.
That I was at the Ohio State-Penn State game with Cris and you at the midway through, not this past season, but the season before. And you were talking about Haskins then.
Yeah.
You were talking about this freshman we have who's going to be the best thrower Ohio State's ever had. So I've had a closer eye on him than most, but the numbers jump off the page.
And he's been special. He's got a special swag about him. He's got a special leadership. Go back and watch the videos of him going to an Ohio State camp, telling the coaches there, man, I'm going to be the quarterback for Ohio State. Man, we were lucky to get him. He was committed to the University of Maryland. Urban Meyer convinced him to be able to come over. Ryan Day's impact on him and what he's learned in pro football and implementing that into the Ohio State offense this year, I believe he's a special kid. I believe it's just now getting started. And if there's a quarterback you want to take a chance on in this year's draft, if there's a thing, Haskins is going to be my guy. All right, because I have just seen it, and sometimes it's not in the numbers. Sometimes you just know. You just know about it when you see it or when you feel it, and I just have that feeling about Haskins. And it's not about Ohio State. It's about a kid who is special throwing the football, just like Baker Mayfield was special throwing the football last year.
I was just about to just put a button on this. So there's only 2 quarterbacks since you and I have known each other over the last 3 years, college quarterbacks, I've heard you talk about to this level. Because, listen, I loved Rosen coming out of school. Like, I get a little overexcited about college quarterbacks. You have a very high threshold for it. Those 2, it wasn't Darnold. Those 2 are Baker Mayfield and this kid. Baker just proved the entire world either wrong or right, depending on what you said about him with what he did with Cleveland. We'll see what Haskins does. But you have been talking about this kid for since he was a high schooler. And what he did this year at Ohio State was break not only the Ohio State records, all of Drew Brees' Big Ten records.
Yeah.
It is a question of who should be the second quarterback taking the draft, not the first.
Who should be the Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Cris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolfe. So long, everybody.